I watched the taillights of our family SUV disappear down the highway, my phone buzzing with a single text from my mother. "You always ruin everything. Find your own way home." I was standing in the parking lot of a run-down gas station somewhere in rural Nevada, 3 states away from home, with $17 in my pocket and a growing certainty that this wasn't the first time this had happened. Because I remembered. I remembered all of it. 3 weeks ago, I died in a car accident on this exact highway, in this exact spot, trying to hitchhike home after they'd abandoned me. I was 23 years old, broke, desperate, and alone. The semi-truck driver never even saw me step onto the road in the dark. But then I woke up 6 months earlier in my childhood bedroom staring at a calendar that read March 15th, the day before spring break, the day before this godforsaken family vacation to California that would end with them leaving me stranded. This time, I wasn't getting in their car. The first time around, I'd been too naive to see it coming, too desperate for their approval to recognize the signs. My family, my mother Patricia, my father Robert, and my golden child sister Victoria, had always treated me like an inconvenience, but I'd convinced myself that deep down, they loved me, that this vacation would be different, that maybe, finally, we could be a real family. I was wrong. Let me take you back to how it all began in both lives. My name is Cassandra Chen, though everyone called me Cassie. I was the unplanned second daughter, born 3 years after Victoria, and from the moment I took my first breath, I was a disappointment. Victoria was everything I wasn't. Beautiful, charismatic, naturally talented at everything she touched. She had my mother's delicate features and my father's sharp intelligence. I apparently got nothing worth having. My childhood was a masterclass in subtle neglect. Victoria got piano lessons. I got told we couldn't afford activities for both of us. Victoria got new clothes for school. I got her hand-me-downs. When Victoria wanted to go to an expensive summer camp, they found the money. When I needed money for a school trip, I was told to get a part-time job. "You need to learn responsibility, Cassie," my father would say, not looking up from his newspaper. "Victoria has a gift. We need to invest in her future." My future apparently wasn't worth investing in. It wasn't just about money. It was the 1,000 small cuts that bled me dry over the years. The way my mother would forget to pick me up from school but never forgot Victoria. The way my father would attend every one of Victoria's recitals but miss every one of my academic awards ceremonies. And I had plenty, because grades were the only thing I could control. The way Victoria could do no wrong, even when she stole money from my part-time job savings, and I was told I must have miscounted. By the time I was 18, I'd learned to expect nothing. I got into a decent state university on a partial scholarship, worked 2 jobs to cover the rest, and saw my family maybe twice a year. Victoria, of course, went to a prestigious private college fully funded by our parents, where she studied art history and partied her way through 4 years. I graduated with a degree in accounting and a job lined up at a mid-sized firm. Nothing glamorous, but it was mine. I'd earned it. For the first time in my life, I felt like maybe I could build something for myself. Then Victoria's life imploded. She'd graduated with no job prospects, no real skills, and a mountain of credit card debt from trying to maintain her lifestyle. She moved back home, and suddenly I was getting phone calls from my mother. "Cassie, your sister is going through a hard time. The least you could do is help out the family." Help out meant sending money. It always meant sending money. And like an idiot, I did it. Because some pathetic part of me still hoped that if I was useful enough, generous enough, selfless enough, they might finally see me as worthy. The vacation invitation came out of nowhere. "We're doing a family road trip to California," my mother announced over the phone. "All of us together. It's time we reconnected as a family, don't you think?" I should have known better. I should have heard the trap in her sugary voice. But I was so hungry for belonging that I said yes. In my first life, I took a week off work, packed my bags, and showed up at their house with genuine excitement. We loaded into my father's new SUV, the one he'd bought with money he claimed he didn't have when I'd asked for help with my student loans, and headed west. The trip was terrible from the start. I was relegated to the back seat, cramped and uncomfortable, while Victoria stretched out in the middle row with her bags and blankets. When I asked if we could switch, she rolled her eyes. "God, Cassie, you're so needy. Just deal with it." We stopped for meals at restaurants Victoria chose, even though they were out of my budget. When I tried to order something cheaper, my mother made comments about me being difficult and not a team player. I ended up putting the meals on my credit card, telling myself it was worth it for family bonding. There was no bonding. They talked amongst themselves, sharing inside jokes and memories from events I'd never been invited to. When I tried to join the conversation, they would pause, wait for me to finish, then continue as if I hadn't spoken. 3 days into the trip, we stopped at that gas station in Nevada. I went inside to use the restroom and grab a coffee. I was gone maybe 10 minutes. When I came out, the SUV was gone. I called my mother's phone. No answer. My father's. Nothing. Victoria's went straight to voicemail. I stood there, confused, assuming they'd driven to get gas at a different pump or moved the car to a better parking spot. Then came the text from my mother. You always ruin everything. Find your own way home. I called again and again. My father finally picked up. Dad, what's going on? Where are you? Cassie, we've had enough. You've done nothing but complain this entire trip. You're negative, you're ungrateful, and frankly, we're tired of it. We're continuing to California. You can make your own arrangements. But Dad, I can't. We're in the middle of nowhere. You're 23 years old. Figure it out. He hung up. I stood there, dizzy with shock and disbelief. They'd actually left me. My own family had abandoned me at a gas station in the middle of the desert. I had $17 in cash, a debit card with maybe $200 in my account, and no way to get home. The nearest town was 40 miles away. My phone was at 30% battery. I tried to call friends, but most of my college friends had scattered after graduation, and my work friends barely knew me. I was that quiet girl who kept to herself, who never talked about her family or her personal life because admitting the truth was too humiliating. I ended up in the gas station for hours trying to figure out a plan. The attendant felt sorry for me and let me stay, but when night fell, he had to close up. There's a motel about 5 miles down the road, he said, but I don't know if they're any good. I couldn't afford a motel. I couldn't afford anything. I decided to walk along the highway, hoping to find somewhere safe to wait until morning when maybe I could call a bus station or find some solution. I never made it. The truck came out of nowhere, and I was so tired, so defeated, so broken that I didn't react fast enough. Then I was 22 again, waking up in my apartment 6 months before the trip with memories of a future that hadn't happened yet. The first few days, I thought I was losing my mind. I went through my phone, checking dates, looking at messages. Everything confirmed it. I was 6 months in the past of Bathurst. The vacation invitation hadn't come yet. Victoria was still living at home, still unemployed, still draining our parents' resources. And I knew exactly what was coming. Once I accepted that this was real, that somehow I'd been given a second chance, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be their victim again. I wasn't going to get in that car. I wasn't going to die alone and abandoned on a desert highway. I was going to destroy them. But I had to be smart about it. I couldn't just refuse the vacation invitation when it came. They'd just cut me off entirely, and I'd lose my chance for real revenge. No, I needed to play along right up until the perfect moment. I spent those 6 months preparing. First, I started documenting everything. Every text message, every phone call, every interaction with my family. I downloaded an app that recorded conversations and backed everything up to a cloud server. I started building a paper trail of their abuse, their manipulation, their neglect. Second, I did some digging into my family's finances. My father was a mid-level executive at a tech company, and my mother didn't work. They lived in a nice house in the suburbs, drove expensive cars, and maintained an upper-middle-class lifestyle. But as I poked around, checking public records, looking at their social media, piecing together information, I realized something interesting. They were drowning in debt. The new SUV, leased with terms they could barely afford. The house, mortgaged to the hilt with a second loan taken out to pay for Victoria's college. Their retirement accounts, nearly empty because they'd raided them to maintain their lifestyle. My mother was particularly bad with money. She had 7 credit cards, all maxed out, hidden from my father. She'd been using them to fund Victoria's lifestyle: expensive clothes, beauty treatments, dinners at fancy restaurants, and paying minimum payments that were bleeding them dry. Victoria, meanwhile, was even worse. She had her own credit card debt plus personal loans from friends she never intended to pay back. She'd been lying on her resume, claiming degrees and experiences she didn't have, trying to land a high-paying job she wasn't qualified for. My family was a house of cards waiting to collapse. Third, and most importantly, I remembered something from my previous life that I'd forgotten in the chaos of being abandoned. My grandmother, my father's mother, Eleanor Chen, had cut off contact with my father 15 years ago after a massive fight. I'd been a child, too young to understand what happened, but I knew she was wealthy, genuinely wealthy, not fake wealthy like my parents. She'd owned a successful chain of restaurants and had invested wisely. When she'd cut off my father, he'd lost any chance of an inheritance. In my previous life, I'd never thought to reach out to her. I'd believed my parents' version of events, that she was a cruel, bitter old woman who'd abandoned her son over nothing. But now, with adult eyes and the bitter clarity of betrayal, I wondered if there was more to the story. I found her surprisingly easily. She was living in San Francisco, still sharp and active at 75, running a charitable foundation with her money. I crafted a careful email introducing myself as her granddaughter, saying I'd recently learned about the family rift and wanted to understand her side of things. She responded within an hour. "Cassandra, I've thought about you and your sister often over the years. I'd be happy to meet with you. I think there's a lot you don't know about your father." We met at a cafe in San Francisco. I took a weekend trip, telling my parents I was visiting a friend. Eleanor was elegant and dignified, with steel gray hair and eyes that saw everything. "You look like my mother," she said, studying my face. "Your sister looks like your father's side, but you're a Chen through and through." Over coffee, she told me the truth about the family rift my father had stolen from her. 15 years ago, he'd had access to her business accounts as a trusted family member. When her restaurants hit a rough patch, he'd embezzled nearly $500,000, covering his tracks and blaming the company's accountant. She'd discovered the truth, confronted him, and he'd denied everything. When she threatened to press charges, he'd cut contact and told everyone she was losing her mind to dementia. "There was no dementia," Eleanor said quietly. "There was just a son I loved who chose greed over integrity. I let it go because he was my son, and I thought maybe he'd mature, maybe he'd feel guilty and try to make amends. But he never did. He just took my money and built his life on it." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you reached out to me. Because I've watched from afar as your parents favored your sister, as they neglected you. I saw it at family gatherings before the rift, how differently they treated you two. I sent birthday cards and Christmas presents for years, but I suspect you never received them." "I hadn't? I'd never gotten a single card or present from my grandmother?" "Your father is a narcissist, Cassandra. Your mother enables him, and your sister is becoming just like them. But you reached out to me. That takes courage and independence. That tells me you're different." Over the next few months, Eleanor and I built a relationship. She was everything my parents weren't: supportive, interested in my life, proud of my accomplishments. She told me about my family history, about the restaurant business, about investments and finance, and she told me something that changed everything. "When I die, my estate is worth approximately $40 million. Your father doesn't know this. He thinks I lost everything in the recession. I've let him believe it, but I've been updating my will, and I want you to know that you're in it. Not him, not your mother or sister, you." I was stunned. "Grandmother, I didn't reach out to you for money." "I know, that's exactly why you're getting it. But I'm not dead yet, and I'm not planning to die anytime soon. So, in the meantime, I want to help you. I want to teach you how to be smart with money, how to invest, how to build real wealth. And when the time comes, I want you to be ready to handle what I'm leaving you." It felt like a dream, but it was real, and it was mine. When the vacation invitation finally came in mid-March, I was ready. "A family road trip to California sounds wonderful," I told my mother on the phone, injecting false enthusiasm into my voice. "I'd love to come." I packed my bags, took the week off work, and showed up at their house right on schedule. But this time, I had a plan. I'd already told Eleanor about the trip, and she'd offered to be my backup plan. "If anything goes wrong, anything at all, you call me immediately. I'll have my driver come get you wherever you are. I'd loaded my phone with portable chargers, downloaded offline maps, and had a credit card Eleanor had given me for emergencies, one tied to her account with a $50,000 limit. But more than that, I had my recordings, my documentation, and a clear plan for revenge. The trip went exactly as it had before. I was relegated to the back seat, ignored in conversations, forced to pay for meals I couldn't afford. I let them treat me like garbage, documenting every moment. My mother's snide comments. Cassie, you really should do something about your hair. You always look so unkempt. Victoria's dismissiveness. Can you stop trying to join our conversations? It's exhausting. My father's coldness. Cassie, we're stopping here for dinner. I assume you can cover your own meal. I smiled and nodded and played the role of the pathetic younger sister, just as I had before. On the third day, we stopped at the same gas station in Nevada. I need to use the restroom, I announced. Make it quick, my father said, not looking at me. I went inside, but this time I didn't just use the restroom and grab a coffee. I went to the counter and spoke to the attendant. Hi, I need to report a situation. My family is about to abandon me here. I know how this sounds, but I need you to be a witness. Can you check the security footage in about 10 minutes? You'll see their SUV leaving without me. The attendant, a middle-aged man named Frank, looked skeptical but concerned. Are you in danger? Not physically, but yes, in a way. Can you just watch what happens? I promise I'll explain. He agreed, more out of curiosity than anything. I went back outside, getting coffee and snacks, deliberately taking my time. Through the window, I watched my family in the SUV. I saw my mother check her phone, say something to my father. I saw Victoria laugh. Then I watched the SUV start up and drive away. I stood there in the parking lot, my phone in my hand, waiting. Right on schedule, my mother's text arrived. You always ruin everything. Find your own way home. I took a screenshot. Then I went back inside. They left, I told Frank quietly, just like I said they would. He pulled up the security footage and we watched together as the SUV clearly, deliberately drove away, leaving me behind. Jesus, Frank muttered. What kind of family does that? The kind I'm done with, I said. I called Eleanor. She answered on the first ring. Grandmother, they left me at the gas station, just like I knew they would. Give me the address. My driver will be there in 2 hours. While I waited, I did something I'd been planning for months. I posted to social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, every platform I had. I posted the screenshot of my mother's text, a photo of the empty parking lot, and a carefully worded message. Stranded at a gas station in Nevada by my family on vacation. They drove away and told me to find my own way home. I'm safe and have help. Coming, but I wanted to document this moment. This is what family abandonment looks like. I tagged my parents and Victoria. I made it public. Then I called my father. He answered with irritation. What, Cassie? Just wanted to let you know I'm safe. Grandmother Eleanor is sending someone to get me. Silence. Then, what? Grandmother Eleanor, you know, your mother? The one you stole $500,000 from? The one you told me was crazy? Yeah, we've been in contact for 6 months. She's been wonderful, really supportive. So much better than you ever were. Cassie, I don't know what lies she's been telling you. Oh, she didn't tell me lies. She told me the truth. About the embezzlement. About how you've always been a narcissist and a thief. About how you treated me like garbage because I reminded you of her, but don't worry, Dad, I'm done now. I'm done with all of you. You ungrateful little... I hung up. My phone exploded with notifications. The social media post was spreading. Friends, distant relatives, even co-workers were commenting, sharing, expressing shock and outrage. My mother's friends, her social circle, were seeing it. My father's colleagues, Victoria's friends. The narrative I'd carefully crafted was taking hold. I was the victim. They were the villains. My mother called screaming. I let it go to voicemail. Victoria texted a string of profanities. I blocked her. Eleanor's driver, a kind older man named Marcus, arrived exactly when she said he would. He brought water, snacks, and a reassuring presence. Miss Chen has instructed me to take you to her home in San Francisco, he said. She's preparing a room for you and wants you to know you're welcome to stay as long as you'd like. I settled into the back of the comfortable sedan, so different from the cramped SUV, and watched the desert roll past. I felt lighter than I had in years. The real revenge was just beginning. When I arrived at Eleanor's home, a beautiful Victorian in Pacific Heights, she hugged me tight. "You're safe now," she said. "And now we make them pay." Over the next few days, the fallout was spectacular. My social media post had gone viral, picked up by local news stations and even some national outlets. "Family abandons daughter at gas station" made for compelling headline material. Reporters reached out to my parents for comment. My father gave a disastrous interview where he tried to claim I'd been difficult and chose to stay behind, which was immediately contradicted by the gas station's security footage, which Frank had helpfully provided to me. My mother tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, that they'd just driven to another gas station and I'd overreacted. But the text message screenshot destroyed that lie. Victoria tried to defend them online, posting long rants about how I was playing the victim and had always been jealous of her. But her friends started turning on her, calling out the cruelty of abandoning a family member. My parents' social circle imploded. My mother's friends distanced themselves. My father's company launched an internal investigation after someone sent them the media coverage, worried about his judgment and ethics. But I wasn't done, not even close. With Eleanor's help, I hired a lawyer, a very good lawyer. We filed a civil suit against my parents for emotional distress, seeking damages for years of documented abuse and neglect. The documentation I'd spent months gathering became the foundation of an airtight case. Text messages where my mother called me worthless. Emails where my father refused to help with emergency medical bills while funding Victoria's shopping trips. Bank records showing the wildly disparate spending on Victoria versus me. Testimony from teachers, neighbors, and family friends who'd witnessed the favoritism. The case made more headlines. Golden Child Syndrome, a legal battle over parental favoritism, ran in several major publications. Eleanor also quietly hired a private investigator to dig into my parents' finances. What we found was even worse than I'd thought. My father hadn't just embezzled from Eleanor years ago. He'd been cooking the books at his company, skimming money from departmental budgets to cover his personal expenses. When we turned that evidence over to his employer, he was fired immediately and faced criminal charges. My mother's credit card fraud, yes, fraud because she'd been using my father's information to open cards without his knowledge, came to light during the lawsuit's discovery process. She faced charges too, and Victoria? Victoria had been lying about her credentials so egregiously that it constituted fraud. She'd claimed on job applications to have degrees she didn't earn and work experience she'd fabricated entirely. When her lies were exposed publicly, I made sure they were, she became unhireable. The media loved the story. It had everything: family drama, betrayal, a Cinderella narrative with a twist. I gave one carefully orchestrated interview to a sympathetic journalist, laying out years of abuse in clinical detail. "I just want people to understand that family abuse doesn't always leave physical scars," I said. "Sometimes it's in the small moments of neglect, the constant message that you're not worth loving. And sometimes it escalates to something like being abandoned at a gas station in the middle of nowhere." The public response was overwhelming. I received thousands of messages of support from people who'd experienced similar family dynamics. Some sent money, which I donated to charities supporting abused children. Others shared their own stories, creating a movement around recognizing and addressing family neglect. My parents tried to reach out, tried to apologize, tried to claim they'd made a mistake. But I was done accepting their scraps. The lawsuit was settled out of court 8 months later. My parents agreed to pay me $100,000 in damages, money they didn't have, which meant they had to sell their house, their cars, and anything else of value. They moved into a small apartment in a bad part of town, both facing criminal charges, both unemployable. My mother had a nervous breakdown and spent time in a psychiatric facility. My father became bitter and angry, but powerless. Victoria tried to move back home with them, but their tiny apartment couldn't accommodate her, and she had no money of her own. She ended up living in a series of cheap rentals, working minimum wage jobs. Her dreams of a glamorous life evaporated. I felt no pity for any of them. Meanwhile, my life transformed. Eleanor became not just my grandmother, but my mentor and closest family. She taught me about business, about investing, about the restaurant industry. She introduced me to her network of wealthy, successful people who treated me with respect. You have a gift for numbers, she told me. And more importantly, you have integrity. Those two things together are rare and valuable. She brought me into her charitable foundation, teaching me how to manage it, how to make real differences in people's lives. We funded scholarships for kids from abusive homes. We supported organizations helping young people escape toxic families. I left my accounting job and went back to school part-time for an MBA, funded entirely by Eleanor. I graduated top of my class and took a position as CFO of her foundation, overseeing $40 million in assets. Eleanor lived for 5 more years, healthy and sharp until the very end. When she passed, she left me everything, just as she'd promised, $40 million plus her properties plus control of the foundation. I was 28 years old and wealthier than my parents could have dreamed. My father tried to contest the will, of course. He claimed undue influence, claimed I'd manipulated a vulnerable old woman. But Eleanor had anticipated this and left extensive documentation of her reasoning, video recordings explaining her decisions, testimony from her lawyers and doctors confirming her sound mind. The case was thrown out. He got nothing. I used some of the money to expand the foundation's work. We helped hundreds of young people escape abusive families, provided therapy and support, funded education and job training. Every person we helped was a repudiation of my parents' values, a living testament to the idea that some families aren't worth keeping. I also bought a house, a beautiful brownstone in San Francisco, decorated exactly how I wanted, filled with art and books and peace. I hosted dinners for friends I'd made through Eleanor's network, people who valued kindness and integrity. I dated and eventually fell in love with a kind man named David, a doctor who worked with underserved communities. He knew my whole story and loved me anyway, not despite my scars, but with full recognition of them. You survived, something that would have broken most people, he said. And you turned it into something beautiful. That's incredible. We got married in a small ceremony at my house, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us. Eleanor's friends came, the foundation staff came, my real friends came. Not a single member of my biological family was invited or welcome. I didn't send them announcements. I didn't tell them about my life. I'd blocked them on every platform, changed my phone number, made it clear through lawyers that any contact would be considered harassment. They occasionally tried to reach out through mutual acquaintances, sending messages about how they'd changed, how they wanted to reconcile, how family was important. I never responded. 10 years after that day at the gas station, I was 33 years old, happily married, running a successful foundation, and living a life beyond anything I'd imagined in my first lifetime. My parents were in their 60s, still struggling in their cramped apartment, their marriage barely surviving the strain of their fall from grace. My father's criminal case had resulted in a suspended sentence and probation, but the stain on his reputation meant he never worked in his field again. My mother's mental health never fully recovered. Victoria was 36, single, bitter, and working as a retail manager, a job she hated but couldn't escape because her lies had closed every other door. She'd tried to reach out to me several times over the years, sometimes apologizing, sometimes angry, always wanting something. I never responded to her either. One day, I received a letter, an actual physical letter, forwarded through my lawyer. It was from my mother, written in her shaky handwriting. "Dear Cassie," it read, "I know you don't want to hear from us, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for how we treated you. I'm sorry for the vacation. I'm sorry for all of it. I was a terrible mother, and I've had years to think about what we did to you. Your father and I are old now, and we're not well. Victoria is struggling. We're your family, Cassie. Doesn't that mean something? Can't we try again?" I read the letter once, then put it through the shredder in my home office. Family is supposed to mean something. It's supposed to mean love, support, safety. But for me, family had meant pain, neglect, and betrayal. The people who shared my blood had tried to break me, had abandoned me on a highway in the desert, had treated me as less than human. They'd had their chance, thousands of chances over decades. They'd chosen cruelty every single time. I chose freedom. My real family was David, who loved me unconditionally. It was the team at the foundation working every day to help people like me. It was Eleanor's memory, guiding me still. It was the chosen family I'd built from people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. Sometimes late at night, I thought about that gas station. I thought about my first life, dying alone on a dark highway, believing I was worthless because that's what they had always told me. I thought about the moment in my second life when I watched their taillights disappear and felt not panic, but liberation. That was the moment I'd truly been reborn. Not when I woke up 6 months in the past, but when I stood in that parking lot and chose myself over them. I never got in their car again, literally or metaphorically, and I'd never been happier. 20 years after that day at the gas station, I stood in the Foundation's new headquarters, a beautiful building in downtown San Francisco that served as both offices and a resource center for abuse survivors, and addressed a room full of young people who'd escaped their own toxic families. The hardest thing about leaving an abusive family, I told them, is that the world tells you family is everything, that you should forgive, that blood is thicker than water, that you only get one family. But the full quote is, "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The bonds we choose are stronger than the bonds we're born into." I saw recognition in their eyes, the same realization I'd had standing in that gas station parking lot. You are not obligated to light yourself on fire to keep people warm, even if they're family, especially if they're family. You deserve love, respect, and safety, and if you can't find that in your biological family, then you create a new one. You choose people who choose you back. After the speech, a young woman approached me, maybe 22, with tears in her eyes. "My parents kicked me out when I was 17, she said. "I've been struggling ever since, and everyone keeps telling me I should reconcile with them, that I'll regret it if I don't. But hearing your story, it makes me feel like maybe I'm not wrong to stay away." I took her hands in mine. "You're not wrong. Trust your instincts, protect yourself, build a life you're proud of. That's the best revenge." She hugged me, and I felt Eleanor's presence in that moment. The wisdom she'd passed down to me, now flowing through me to this young woman and hundreds like her. My parents died within a year of each other when I was 45. My father went first, a heart attack in his sleep. My mother followed from complications of her long-term mental illness. I found out from a distant cousin who thought I should know. I felt nothing. No grief, no relief, no closure. They'd become strangers long ago. Victoria reached out one final time asking if I'd help with funeral expenses. I had my lawyer send a brief response. No. She tried to guilt me, sending messages about how I was cruel, how I'd become just as bad as them, how I'd abandoned my family when they needed me most. I blocked her and moved on, because she still didn't understand. None of them ever did. I hadn't abandoned them. They'd abandoned me first, over and over, for my entire childhood and young adult life, culminating in that gas station in Nevada. I'd simply stopped coming back. And that wasn't cruelty, that was survival. Today, I'm 53 years old. David and I have been married for 25 years. We never had children. I was too afraid I'd repeat my parents' patterns, but we've mentored dozens of young people through the foundation, giving them the support and guidance I never had. The foundation has helped over 10,000 people escape abusive families, providing financial support, therapy, job training, and most importantly, validation that their pain was real and their choice to leave was right. I've written a book about my experience, which became a bestseller and has helped countless others recognize and name their own family trauma. The speaking engagements, the interviews, the platform, all of it serves to amplify a simple message. You are not obligated to maintain relationships that destroy you, even with family. I have a good life, a peaceful life, a life I built from the ashes of who I used to be. Sometimes I still think about that alternate timeline, the first life where I died on that highway. I think about how close I came to believing their narrative about me, that I was worthless, that I was the problem, that I deserved to be abandoned. But I was given a gift, a second chance, foreknowledge, and the wisdom to use it. I'd watched them drive away twice. The first time killed me, the second time freed me. And I've spent every day since making sure other people know they can be freed too. Last month, I received a letter from a woman named Sarah. She'd read my book and attended one of my foundation's workshops. She wrote about how she'd been planning to reconcile with her abusive mother, convinced by guilt and social pressure that she had to try one more time. But then I read the chapter about the gas station, she wrote, about how you knew they were going to abandon you and you let them because that was the moment you needed to prove to yourself that they were who you thought they were. That gave me permission to stop trying. I didn't need one more disappointment to prove what I already knew. I could just stop, and I did. Thank you for showing me it was okay. I cried reading that letter. Not sad tears, but tears of recognition and gratitude. That's what Eleanor had given me. Permission to stop, permission to choose myself, permission to walk away from people who didn't value me, and now I got to give that permission to others. The Foundation's work continues to grow. We've expanded to multiple cities, helped establish similar organizations in other countries, changed laws around recognizing emotional abuse. Every person we help, every law we change, every story we amplify, it's all part of the same mission. No one should die alone on a highway because their family convinced them they were worthless. No one should sacrifice themselves trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it. No one should have to get in that car. On the anniversary of that day at the gas station, I mark it privately every year. I drive out to Nevada, not to the exact spot, but close enough. I stand on the side of the highway and look at the desert and remember. I remember the girl I was, desperate for scraps of affection. I remember the woman I became, learning to value herself. I remember the moment of choice, watching those taillights disappear, knowing I was finally, truly free. And then I get back in my car, the one I bought with money I earned, the one I drive wherever I choose, and I go home. To a house full of love, to a life full of purpose, to a family I chose. That's the real ending of this story. Not revenge, though there was plenty of that. Not justice, though that came too. The real ending is this: I am happy, I am valued, I am loved, and I never, ever got back in their car.